What's up, guys? This is a response video to CountBlagorath's video he made, where he was asking people that are subscribed to him or viewed his channel to make videos showing albums in their collection that mean the most to them. So I wanted to do that for you today. I got a list here from my collection. This isn't everything, this is just a few albums that mean more to me than the rest. Not saying that those up there in my room aren't any more or less, favored. They're just, these are more sentimental, and I'll show you my reasons. I've got a small list. I'm going to go through them as quickly as I can. And I just wanted to also let Runner JMA know and Sean. I've been a long time subscriber for both of you guys. Love everything that you do. You guys continue to make videos. I'll continue to watch them. You guys have my full support. I know Runner JMA, last year you made a video asking for people to prove that they have your back. This is my way of doing that for you. I love everything that you do, and please keep doing what you're doing. So starting with this list. First I've got Ruins of Beverast with Blood Vaults. One of the more pricey albums that I've picked up. I just got it because of the reviews that people are giving it, and I was willing to spend more money because of that. I also love the packaging. The digipack is awesome. Once again, Ruins of Beverast. I spent a lot of money on this, and I'm happy I did. Love this album. Second album on my list. One of my favorite albums of all time. Bought this back in high school. This is Nightwish with Once. I miss you, Tarja. I wish you'd come back to this band. Some of my favorite tracks are on here. Ghost Love Score, number 9, my favorite track of all time. Love that album, love that song so much. Just that build halfway with the horns, and then it explodes into the guitars and the drums, and the horns combined just gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. Love that. Love that. Worth the purchase of the album alone. And that's Nightwish with Once. Third album on the list, rather. This is what I feel like one of the most criminally underrated records of all time. This is Disillusion with Back to Times of Splendor. I have not heard this album get name dropped anywhere when it comes to progressive metal, progressive records. This is one of the best I've ever heard in my life. If you're a fan of progressive metal and you haven't heard Disillusion's Back to Times of Splendor, do yourself a favor. Picked this album up because I saw it listed on this website that's now gone at the time, unfortunately. Metal Review, talking about the top 100 albums of the 2000 from 2000 to 2010, and this was on there. And because of what they had to say about it, I picked it up. I'm absolutely so glad that I picked up read that article and picked up this album, because it was worth everything that I spent. And like I said, if you haven't picked this album up yet and you haven't heard it, please do yourself a favor. Cover killer. You're a fan of progressive music, please pick this up. You will not be disappointed. Fourth album on the list, and this is important to a lot of us in metal, and we all know why, for those of us who have any idea of who this band is. This is Woods of Ypres with Grey Skies and Electric Light. If you don't know the backstory, the lead singer passed away before this album came out, and the lyrics and the songwriting are almost prophetic in a way. Just the way he talks about death, and even leading up to this, during the writing process, people said that he kind of knew, or it came across that he knew something, like his time was almost over. And it really shows in this album. So Grey Skies and Electric Light by Woods of Ypres. Another very sentimental album in my collection. Next up we have Berserker with Dissimulate. I got this because, and I still think it's probably one of the heaviest albums I've ever bought. And I got this back in high school, back when, it was an impulse buy. I liked the look of the band, the masks. This was back when they were still wearing masks, and I was like, that's really cool. It's kind of like Slipknot. And I picked it up, and it was not like Slipknot at all. If you have any idea who these guys are, they're like crazy grindcore, like super fast, speedy grindcore. and I loved it for some reason. I wasn't into this type of music back then, but I just love this record. It's made this one of my favorite bands. I've picked up several more of their records, but this one stands out for me the most out of those. Next, we have For Today with Breaker. This album right here was special to me because I am a religious guy, and the lyrical content in here really spoke to me. A lot of bands that act like they're Christian or are religious, like their message and their songs are very watered down. And these guys didn't have, at the time, act like they weren't afraid to mention God, say the word God, say what they wanted to say, and it really spoke with me. And I was like, man, these guys actually get it. These guys aren't afraid to say what they want to, and I feel like it's changed recently with their last couple, but for this era, For Today, Breaker and Prevailer and Immortal, their lyrical content in there was really spoke to me at that time. So that's why it's very important to me. This is probably one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Eson's After. 2010 was probably one of my favorite years in metal because of this and another album that's later in the list I want to get that I'll talk to you about. But I go back and forth with this and the other album as to what was my favorite album of that year, and this barely gets takes the lead on that one. The saxophone solos is what gets me because I was in band and I played saxophone in high school, and it just putting a saxophone in metal at the time was this isn't it shouldn't work, but for some reason it does in this album, and it has time and time again in metal where the saxophone shows up more and more often and it works. But this was the first time I really got to hear that, and it was just absolutely amazing. Eson's After, one of my favorite albums of all time. Next is Cataclysm with Shadows and Dust. The first record I ever picked up from these guys, and it was very trying for me at the time because I was in high school and I didn't get to go to the store very often to pick up an album, and if I did, this probably wasn't going to be carried. So it's the first album that I picked up online on eBay, and it took forever for it to show up to my house. I got it off eBay, and when it finally did, I listened to the crap out of it. Shadows and Dust, the first track on there, it's probably one of the most memorable death metal tracks for me. I memorized this whole album. Just love this album to death. It was my first exposure to Cataclysm. Bought a bunch of their albums after that, but this one is the most memorable for me. Next would be Ni Obliviscaris with Portal of Eye. This is also one of my favorite progressive metal albums of all time. Made these guys one of my favorite bands, and I know there's a lot of controversy with the guys right now, but they make incredible music in my opinion. And like I said, first album, Forget Not, it's one of my favorite progressive metal tracks of all time. Love this album to death. If you don't have it already, you need to pick it up. This is the other 2010 release that I go back and forth with, along with After by Eson. This is Agalok with Marrow of the Spirit. I can't really say anything what hasn't already been said by this band. It's one of the most highly praised CDs that I own, definitely. A lot of people say that The Mantle is better, or Pale Folklore. I haven't heard either of those, so I can't really say. But this was my first exposure to Agalok. Incredible album. Black Lake Nidstone. It's one of my favorite progressive metal tracks. I owned the Serpent and the Spear. Didn't really care for it as much as I did this one. This one is, since it's my first exposure to probably one of the best progressive metal bands out there, it's really sentimental to me. This one is sentimental in a very different reason. This is Stalag with Pure Misanthropia. This is a experimental noise album from the guys Stalag. If you don't know anything about this project, he came out with an album. I think it was just called Misanthropia, and then he came out with this, which is where they took all the musical aspects down, like took out the production, and it's pretty much just recordings of people in mental asylums screaming, just their wails in the insane asylums, and it's very unnerving and it's very weird to listen. I've only listened to it a couple times. The reason it's special to me, though, is it is the rarest in my collection. This is 112 out of 300 copies that exist. So I mean, I feel like I'm very lucky to have this in a really weird way. But yeah, if you're into experimental, if you're a fan of noise, for the few of you out there that are into that kind of thing, you might want to give this a listen. It'll very much make you unnerved, if anything else. Next, another criminally underappreciated band. This is Progeny Terrestra Pura with the album Uma. This came out in 2012. I had to buy this from Italy. It didn't have a wide release here in the US. I had to pick it up online in Italy, and I was so worried that it was going to be messed up. But it showed up after a couple months. Package was in perfect condition. The CD was, and I listened to this like crazy. If you're into, like I said, once again, cover killer. If you haven't heard this album, I know you're a fan of progressive music. This, if you're into long track lengths, 17-minute long plus, a lot of spacey music, a lot of, I just don't know what else to say about this album. I mean, it's absolutely classic progressive music in mine. I'm so happy to have this in my collection. Glad I bit the bullet and spent the extra money to get it overseas. Next is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Therion with Lemuria and Sirius B. One of my favorite albums of all time. I love orchestra symphonic music. This is one of the first of that type of music that I bought. Absolutely floored when I was in high school. I was like, me and my friends were literally in awe of the music on this record. Some of my favorite tracks on here are the title track Lemuria, gorgeous song. Three Ships of Barrack, Part 1, Calling to Arms and Fighting the Battle, and Part 2 of that, which is Victory. Probably my favorite track on this entire album. The entire album is amazing. It's a lot of listening if you want to pick this up. It's a ton of music on here, and everything is awesome. This was probably one of the biggest productions I've seen in metal, and these guys really pulled it off with this album. Next is easily my favorite album of all time, from one of my favorite bands of all time. This is Soilwork with Natural Born Chaos. I have this entire album memorized. I listened to this thing on repeat constantly in high school. It's probably one of my first real metal albums I ever bought. These guys are my favorite band, and it started, pretty much my whole metal music journey started with this album right here. You know, they've probably come out, they had a lull after this album, with a couple of albums. Figure Number 5, Sworn to Great Divide, Stabbing the Drama. None of those were that great. After that, they picked it up. They've really picked it up recently. And before that, they were considered classic Swedish death, thrash, melodic, whatever. But this is where it started for me. It's very important. This last one is the most sentimental album for me in my entire collection, because it was the very first album that I listened to that had metal music on it, the very first album I ever purchased. This really was the start of it all, what started me on this whole thing. This is, for the few of you who may know what this is a compilation album, The Hard and the Heavy, Volume 1. I don't know if they ever made any volumes after this. If they did, let me know. But this is, I remember when I first listened to this, I was in elementary school. I think it was like 7th grade or 6th grade, going to a haunted house in October with my family. my sister's boyfriend was into metal at that time. You know, high school metal kid. New metal was the thing. He had this. I don't know why he had it, but he had it sitting in his car in his little Walkman. And I didn't even ask. I was that kid. I just picked it up and put on the headphones and started listening to it. Listened to the whole thing. It was my first exposure to bands like Slipknot, Cold Chamber, Limp Bizkit, Rob Zombie, Static X. Excuse me there. Yeah, all these bands, you know, that were stalwarts. I'd never heard of these bands or heard of any real metal music before this. This is the one that started it for me. And, you know, just looking at it now just brings back all those memories. It's just, this is very sentimental to me. Like, this wouldn't exist without this for me. This album right here started everything. I rebought it a few years ago because I saw it on eBalms. I saw it on freaking Amazon for $5. So I picked it up, and it hasn't held up very well, obviously. I tried listening to it, and sometimes I'm like, why did I like this stuff? But, you know, my tastes have changed, obviously. But I still stand by this as where I started. This will always be on the top shelf in my room, hanging up displayed, because without this album right here, this wouldn't exist. But yeah, I appreciate your time. This is a response to CountBlagorath's video. Hopefully you guys will see this. Thank you so much. And this is the time where I awkwardly go up to the camera and turn it off. But thank you guys.